Building Week. It's actually 2 weeks this year, which is great. Most, if not all of these events are free. I think at least 90% of them are free. And we want to make a special plug for, there's an embodied carbon two-parter next Wednesday, during which one of my coworkers will be presenting on another Hennebery Eddy project. It's a mass timber project. So be sure to check out the calendar of events on sustainablebuildingweek.org. And then thank you to the top 2020 sponsors. It's great to see this list growing every year. And thank you to our collaborating organizers. And before I jump in, I just want to go over some meeting etiquette. So this meeting will be recorded. Thank you, Erica. So please keep your cameras off unless you're presenting or if you want to be recorded. And please keep your speakers on mute. I will try to do a mute all just to catch everybody. And for any questions, please type your questions in the chat and we will answer them at the end. So let's jump in. This course is hosted by Hennebery Eddy Architects. It is focused on occupant comfort and sustainability in aviation design with a focus on the newly opened Concourse E Extension. It's an extension to Portland International Airport, which we'll refer to as PDX. These are AIA slides I have to show you. This will be eligible for a HSW learning unit. If you are not a member of Hennebery Eddy Architects and you want AIA credits, please email Michael Moran. He'll put his email address in the chat and he will make sure you get those credits. Make sure to send him your AIA number. Course description and learning objectives, I believe you read in the event description, so I won't spend too much time there. The people you'll hear from today are me, Pooja. I'm an architect and also had a sustainability focus on this project. You'll also hear from Ashley Norred. She is an associate and interior designer at Hennebery Eddy Architects. You'll also hear from Michael Lindsay, our lighting designer and principal in charge at HLB Lighting, and Amaya Pires-Usteros from HLB, who is our daylighting specialist. I have to say that this is just a very, very small portion of the massive team that worked on this project. So we designed this project in collaboration with Fentress Architects out of Denver. We had a huge team of consultants ranging from paging speaker specialists to baggage handling designers, just a huge team of amazing consultants and our amazing client, the Port of Portland. So this is just, I have to emphasize, a very small portion of a massive team that worked on this project. To let you know what we're getting into today, I'll first do a project introduction, talk a bit about human scale and thermal comfort. Then I'll pass it off to HLB Lighting, who will talk about circadian rhythms, daylight views, wayfinding, and then we have a large portion on interior design, focused on acoustics, biophilic design, indoor environmental amenities, and accessibility, all things that are hugely important to occupant comfort. And then we'll close with a summary of the net positive impact of this project. So to start, the reason that this project needed to happen in the first place was there was a huge imbalance in passenger flow. So a majority of passengers were going to the south security checkpoint for these gates, and a much smaller portion was going to the north gates. So this project relocated a major airline into this massive 835-foot extension to Concourse E. And in the end, we were able to balance out the passenger flow. So that's kind of our first occupant comfort strategy here, is to just balance passenger flow at both ticketing areas, as well as flow to all of the concession amenities throughout the concourse. I mentioned that we worked in collaboration with Fentress out of Denver. So the first thing the project team did was a big tour of the Columbia River Gorge so they could understand the sense of the region. And we referred to these photos throughout the entire design process The team did a trip through Oneida Falls and were inspired by the canyon-like forms, which informed our project's form. The dappled light through the trees was another huge concept for us. The linear quality of the forest on our facade, and then the textural quality of the columnar basalt informed some of the interior materials. Another huge factor that influenced the project design was we recognized that we were on a campus of some incredible architectural pieces, these huge glassy moments that really invite you to the airport and make the airport a special place. Our project, this blue bar right here, is located right across the street from the Port of Portland headquarters. That's this beautiful building right here. And we realized that with our extension, we were sort of forming the gateway into the airport, and we felt that was a huge opportunity for us. So we took inspiration from the angle of the Port of Portland headquarters building right here, and used that to kind of push our building into its sort of, give it its sort of canyon-like form, and give us all that beautiful south-facing glass. And then we opened up views on the north side that open out to the Columbia River, and views to the east side that look out to Mount Hood. And by opening up views to these natural features that are special to the region, it kind of gives you a sense of place as you're flying into Oregon for the first time. This is what that looks like, that gateway entry with the Port of Portland headquarters building on one side and our project on the other. And you can see that great view to Mount Hood. So you drive in this way, as you work your way down the concourse to the east end, you get that awesome view. I'll quickly go through some of the human scale factors here. So all of this south-facing glass obviously needed some heat gain strategies. So we used a low E coating that blocks infrared light to reduce heat gain. We also used frit on the glass that reduces heat gain while still allowing views out and allowing light through. And that kind of gave us that dappled white feeling we were going for. There are vertical fins on the facade. We did a glare study that identified vertical fins as a strategy to reduce roadway glare. And the vertical fins also bring it back down to a human scale as it breaks up this long extension. There's also LED lights on these fins that help articulate the facade at night. We use bird-safe glass. And then for thermal comfort, we have radiators along the entire interior along that facade, both on the south and the north side, to condition the air right as it's entering the building and provide thermal comfort. So moving on to the inside of the building, I talked about how we broke up the facade to bring it down to the human scale. We wanted to do the same thing on the inside. So 835 feet is a long amount of space for a person to kind of take in. We were inspired by the Portland city block. It's known to be a very walkable city, and it has to do with that 200 by 200 foot grid. So we superimposed that grid onto our project and then created these little, what we call nodes, at every intersection. So you'll hear us refer to these as the main concessions node, center concessions node, and east concessions node. Concession meaning food and beverage and retail. And what that did was it gave us this sort of circulation street down the center. It gave us these little shops and cafe-like spaces that then have cafe-like seating on the outside. And it gives places for people to pause throughout the concourse and breaks up that length. And what that looks like is this. So this is existing Concourse E back here. You come in, you pass by some of the gates. We call them hold rooms. If you hear us say hold rooms, it's referring to the gates where you wait for your planes. And then you can't see the carpet, but there's a huge material change as you enter the node. So it goes from carpet to terrazzo. There's a huge, beautiful piece of artwork at each node. And it's really a destination that creates pauses as you work your way down the concourse. So with that, I'm going to now pass it off to HLB Lighting to get more into the specifics of our lighting design.
Thank you, Pooja. And as you just noted, there are a lot of items that that really feed into our collective thinking as a team about sustainability. And it's not just looking at energy consumption and how to reduce it. It really is understanding in a very holistic nature, how do we provide a space that, yes, is energy efficient in how it operates, but also supportive of the occupant, creating comfort and interest in their overall journey. And I think no more relevant is this than in an airport setting, in which we're often dealing and designing with occupants who are arriving from different time zones and perhaps are arriving at their destination for the very first time. So the question becomes, how does lighting best support that? And for our team and for this project, it really started with incorporating as much natural light and connection to out of doors as possible. As we already heard, with providing that stunning view to Mount Hood. And in taking that approach, the intent was to facilitate a holistic synergy between natural and electric light, thus reducing the usage of electric lighting as much as possible, while also positively influencing the passenger experience. So with incorporating the natural light, the real key for our team was managing and controlling direct sunlight penetration, as it is a valuable characteristic that we want to embrace, but embrace it in the right locations. And that's what we'll touch on here shortly. In addition, while most occupants are transient, there were employees occupying a concourse, full time, such as gate agents. And thus, our lighting design really needed to ensure those employees are comfortable and not exposed to uncomfortable glare or high contrast ratios. Now, I mentioned previously the fact that in the airport environment, many people are traveling across multiple time zones, and I know that we've probably all felt that exhaustion, either the same day, next day, or days after when you're going from coast to coast, or even perhaps overseas. And all of that ties back to the circadian rhythm and biological time clock that our body holds. So here on screen is a visual example of how the traditional cycle is supposed to work. Notice that early and late in the day, the human eye is exposed to more of the amber tones and wavelengths of light outside of the cooler tones that you see more in the middle of the day. And this shift in intensity and color of light helps trigger some of the things that you see on screen, like alertness. So now let's imagine what happens when you're traveling. You may wake up early for a flight, right? And then you're greeted by very intense and crisp light when you're checking in or you're sitting in the hold room waiting for your flight. Then, depending on which direction you're traveling, you may arrive at your destination in the morning or maybe really late at night. And all of these variations can really wreak havoc on an individual circadian rhythm. And while there's still a lot to learn about electric lighting and how it may help alleviate this biological confusion, the one thing that we know for certain is that natural light is really the best tool at our disposal in alleviating jet lag and helping balance or reset a person's circadian rhythm. So with that, I'll actually pass it over to my colleague Amaya to walk us through a bit of our process related to, understanding the existing conditions at the airport and how we applied that to our daylighting design efforts.
Thanks, Michael. Well, as Michael was saying, the first thing we need to recognize is that daylight is the primary source of light because it establishes a connection to nature. It gives information of time of day, weather, it sets circadian rhythms, and it impacts our well-being. It is critical for comfort, stress reduction, visual performance, concession sales, and effective wayfinding. So all this makes airports complex, dynamic and layered spaces with a unique set of challenges and critical tasks, such as heightened security, occupant ability to perform tasks like viewing screens or even comparing faces to ID cards. So when possible, it is helpful to have reference spaces of similar conditions or desirable conditions to be able to use them for comparison. And a great technique to do so is to take HDR imagery. HDRI is typically used to approximate how we perceive the extremes of brightness in real life, and it consists of a compression of up to 20 sequential photographs into one single image that is then calibrated to a reference surface of known reflectance. And by doing so, we can map luminance values and contrast ratios within various areas of the image. It is a really useful assessment tool because by evaluating this against industry recommended standards or simulated luminance images, we're able to predict visual comfort and the instances of glare, as I was saying. So moving on to the beginning the assessment of the architectural design, One useful technique is what we call the sun view study. And this is a type of solar study that is used to assess the need for solar shading. And by using a computer model, the building is set at the center of the solar window and is surrounded by potential obstructing buildings or other elements. Then a set of views is taken from the position of the sun and is aimed towards the building. And these are established for a representative set of times, which are typically hour intervals on solstices and equinoxes, but it can vary depending on what we're looking for. So then interior critical task areas of the project are color-coded, as you can see in the images. So we can easily identify which ones and also when those are exposed to direct sun. So in this concourse, the main critical tasks were the gate podiums, the customer service desks, and the concessions. You may be thinking why the hold rooms were considered a tier 2, and the main reason for it is that passengers waiting out the hold rooms are typically, first of all, not there for a really long time, hopefully, and can also look away if there is direct sun. And additionally, it seemed more important in this case to keep that connection with the exterior as much as possible for the reasons that we explained earlier. So here we can see a selection of those sun view images and the critical elements that were in view that are highlighted with the different colored circles. And this helped identify envelope areas that needed special attention, whether through implementing glazing treatments, shading, or any other design strategies. Once we have the big picture of the building envelope, we can move inside and to focus on those other critical task areas specifically. And the first one is the permanent workers' positions, whether gate agents or customer service desks in this case. And by using a technique that can be understood as the reverse of the previous one, which is called observer view or solar window, we now position the camera inside the building where the observer would be, and then the sun path in this case is color-coded in bands for the different seasons, and the glazing is removed. So in this case, those openings through which we see any color from the sun path indicate times and areas of the envelope through which the sun may be entering the space and potentially reaching the eyes of those permanent workers. This was a really helpful tool to assess the architecture, to assist the architecture team in designing that dynamic facade where different panels have different shading properties through the use of various frit patterns, which we will also see in a moment, by identifying which glass panes were more critical to be shaded. As a result of the previous study and the design to have a dynamic facade with different glazing treatments, we had to also test how each glazing type and frit pattern would perform, especially when the sun was in view. So one could think that having a denser frit pattern would just work better than a less dense one, but the reality is that it depends on a number of things, and the first one is whether the frit is actually translucent or opaque. I'm sure everyone has experienced seeing the sun through a translucent surface, and it actually lights up entirely, so it's not the most comfortable situation. So in this case, we needed to verify where we were choosing the right facade pattern depending on where the needs for protection had been identified in this solar window study to make sure the facade was not only beautiful, but also effective. Two key objectives of the project, which Pooja mentioned earlier, were using daylight as much as possible while also preventing glare and achieving a design that would naturally have wayfinding capabilities to help passengers orient themselves to navigate this long concourse. In addition to signage and to using daylight as a natural source to provide that wayfinding during daytime, the team introduced flooring variations, as mentioned earlier as well, in those intermediate nodes in order to indicate spaces of a different nature to break up that length of the concourse. These spaces would have a terrazzo flooring that was really important to analyze to make sure that those wayfinding features were not going to create reflections and therefore glare issues, especially to permanent workers. And as a result, the use of the solar window technique that I was just explaining came in really handy. And coupled with transforming the terrazzo areas into actual mirrors, we were able to conclude that none of those terrazzo locations, which are highlighted in with the red dotted outlines in the slide, were getting any reflections of colored bands, which means that no sunlight reflections were found, which was great. And then the last layer of the facade, in order to achieve another level of sun control, was to provide an automated shading system capable of adapting to the rapidly changing sky conditions. That would also give the permanent workers the power to individually address certain areas that could affect them directly in case of need. So this profile angle study shows that is intended to be coupled or to couple the operation of those shades with the positions of the critical tasks and the architectural design. This was to understand the angles that needed to be shaded during what periods of the day and the year, and also to identify how those could match different target heights that were coincident with architectural elements such as window mullion heights and others. This way, through the automated system with a delay, we would avoid a permanent up and down operation, and we would also avoid having a messy look with shades randomly up or down, but rather a harmonious facade treatment. And one last element to look at when trying to determine the occurrence of glare was to work to mitigate it is to make sure that the space is organized in a way that it allows for brightness adaptation in an airport. And as Michael was alluding to in the circadian cycle slides, when we enter an airport, we go through a great variety of light levels and conditions, whether it is from a bright ticketing area to security, which is typically not daylit at all, and then to the concourses, that happens when we're boarding, then to landing, perhaps even in a different time zone in a bright concourse. Then we go through security and baggage claims, almost always with no daylight at all. And then we get to the exit, and that happens when we arrive. So these sequence of spaces need to be designed in a way that passengers do not suffer from visual stress by changing too much too fast. So this last study intended to test that the overall light levels throughout the concourse were uniform and not excessive to allow those smooth visual transitions. And that is what you can see in this illuminance image, that through that careful design of the facade layers, as well as the clear stories and the implementation of that automated shading system that I was just talking about, overall, the concourse has a uniform daylight distribution. However, given that the daylight conditions can easily change, the final piece to ensure that uniformity is obviously a careful integration with the electric lighting design, which Michael will address in a second.
Thank you. So I think needless to say, there's a lot of effort and study that really went into making sure that daylighting in the space was successful. You know, we touched on the importance of recognizing those permanently occupied positions and those highly reflected surfaces as well throughout the space. And really the intent being that at the end of the day, people don't recognize all of those amazing efforts, but simply recognize a comfortable and enjoyable space. Now, with electric lighting, as we've alluded to, the intent was really for it to take a back seat to the rest of the space. Early on, we established that a successful lighting design was one that really emphasized natural light, de-emphasized electric light, and really enhanced the overall architectural palette and volume. So when electric lighting was necessary, we wanted it to be subtle and introduced in a variety of layers and locations to draw focus to the architectural finishes themselves. So on screen are a couple of really early studies of where we started, incorporating high performing and efficient LED sources within architectural elements themselves to really conceal the light source from view while softly washing the surrounding surfaces. Now, not uncommon in the industry today is the use of LED light sources throughout the projects, and we were no different here. And why it's maybe not an innovative strategy per se, it is still highly effective in delivering a very efficient and efficacious lighting design. And in addition, it inherently provides us with improved dimming characteristics as well as improved lamp life, which really helps support the port's vision for a very maintenance-friendly building. Now, jumping from the concept to the finished product, and skipping all the fun steps in between, you can see here that the end result very much falls in line with where we started. In this finished image, you can see that the space is really bathed in natural light, and you can notice that really the electric lighting is almost, if not completely, off. And this is due to the incorporation of that dimmable LED technology that I mentioned, in conjunction with an automated control system, which incorporates both occupancy as well as photo sensors into the design. The photo sensors help regulate the use of electric light in the space, such that when we have sufficient daylight, the electric lighting really significantly dims. Now, one item that we did want to point out is that while most of the lighting fixtures are off, we did decide in collaboration with the port to leave visible lights in the ceiling on at 10% even when there was adequate daylight. And this really holds true primarily for the hold rooms. And this decision was made to really help communicate that there was still life in the building and that the items were functioning correctly. The hope is that this will reduce calls to maintenance staff about lights not working when in reality they do. So hopefully, as you can see, there was the ever critical thread of comfort, performance, and efficiency really in all of our collective approaches on the project. Not only with architecture and lighting, but also the other aspects that we'll see here related to interior design and acoustics as well. So to jump into more of that fun detail, I will hand it off to Ashley.
Well, thanks, Michael. So much like you've just learned from Michael and Amaya about how daylight can enhance the passenger experience and the passenger journey, acoustics also play an integral role in reducing sound and noise transmission and thus limiting passenger stress. And we achieved this through a variety of methods, one being a combination of acoustic modeling and specifying materials that absorb sound, such as the new and iconic Portland Airport carpet, the perforated metal ceiling with acoustic backing, which you're seeing here in this photo, that is included throughout the entire span of the new concourse. We also included acoustic plaster at some of the vertical surfaces that get a little bit more noise in areas such as the concessions. You can kind of see it peeking out through the hanging artwork here, as well as in the restrooms. And on top of that, we included various thickness of glass at the exterior curtain wall glazing. So that helps actually reduce sound transmission from the jet engines. And in providing that, we also wanted to ensure that the passengers could hear the overhead paging system. So we provided a state-of-the-art paging system for the clarity of those announcements and thus reducing the passenger stress. And in thinking about how passengers interact with the physical environment, our goal for the interior design of this space was to into the chaotic nature that can happen while traveling. And we really wanted to create a place that is unique to PDX, but also provide places to rest, wait, relax through a combination of loose and built-in furniture. And to support these goals, we developed a list of criteria that you're seeing here to drive our decisions throughout the design process. A couple of those key ones are durability and cleanability, which were incredibly important to the port maintenance staff, as well as sustainability, which looks at responsible material sourcing and low chemical emission products. And thinking further about comfort and universal accessibility, we really wanted the design to ensure that all users of different shapes, ages, and types could accessibly use the interiors of the space. And most importantly, we really wanted to focus on products that were previously used in airports to support that durability and long-term longevity. Our work focused in three main concessions areas that Pooja had mentioned earlier. So that first one is the main node here in yellow, and that's home to the majority of the restaurants and food and beverage and a few select retailers. In the center node, we have our coffee kiosk and a area. And at the east end, we have a bar and those beautiful views to Mount Hood. And each of these different node functionalities informed how we created different spatial and furniture elements within these different nodes, and the furniture reflects those uses. We first started off by thinking about how we wanted to explore spatial definition through a built-in element, and that was a partial height wall. So we started kind of to shift around this linear form and push it and pull it, ultimately creating a kit of parts for the built-in furniture. And this physical design element, or the built-ins, also helped with directing passenger flow, which is incredibly important in a busy airport such as PDX. And that easy wayfinding really supports that relaxing passenger experience. Additionally, the built-ins also feature benches placed periodically through the concourse, right here where my cursor is hovering, and here as well as further down in the center node, which is critical to the length of the concourse, given people traveling with multiple family members or older generations. Providing that place of rest was really important to us in supporting that long-term occupant comfort. And each of these built-in elements serves its own function and provides a different passenger amenity, whether it is a place to perch and charge your device, or a planter to enjoy greenery and the views to the outside, or quick access to refill your water bottle and throw your trash or recycling away before you hop on your flight. And throughout our design process, we really focused on the durability and cleanability of the materials themselves. So we prioritized cleanable materials such as quartz and stainless steel at these high impact locations of the vertical surfaces and corners, really to help with the longevity of these pieces so they can hold up and still look great over time. Material transparency was also an integral part of our finish selection. So for example, this darker gray quartz that you're seeing here is by Cambria. They have a health product declaration, or an HPD, which discloses all of the chemicals of concern and the associated health impacts of those chemicals. It has a declare label, which means it is free of most red list chemicals, and is made right here in the USA, which really helps us lower the carbon footprint, especially given the weight of the product. We also prioritize the local manufacturers of some of the additional built-in materials. So at the partial height wall that you're seeing right here, it is clad in a product made right here in Portland by Formology. The cabinet doors to the trash and recycling center are made by Richlight. They are a company outside of Seattle, and they create products made from recycled content with low VOC materials. And these shapes and forms that you're seeing here with the built-ins really harken back to that regional inspiration that Pooja had mentioned earlier, speaking to the Pacific Northwest landscape and natural environment. And the canted forms that are showing up here in the photos, these shapes actually resemble fallen trees in the forest. So that was something we really wanted to incorporate within the story of the building, so you can kind of see how the natural environment weaved itself throughout the entire project. And the built-in forms combine with the loose furniture to create these dynamic spaces that not only support the concessionaires, but provide a variety of seating options for the passengers. So the shapes and the forms of the built-ins, these canted forms here, not only provide different seating zones, but they also shield passengers from the main circulation path right here, which can get pretty busy, especially when flights are coming in and out of the hold rooms. Something to note is that we have reduced the density for social distancing and COVID considerations. So if you go out to the airport, it will look a little bit different than the layout you're seeing here. And if we zoom in to the main node, what we've done here is created different groupings of furniture types and layered them to address the different lengths of stays. So temporary stays are closer to the main walkway here, such as the little kind of seating areas outside of the concessionaire or the patio area. And these seats are a little bit more of a hard sit. They are made from wood and maybe not as comfortable as some of the seats that start to get a little bit softer, have some different sits and amenities as you get closer to the window. So the longer your stay, the softer and more comfortable the seating groups become, particularly to enjoy the daylight and the views outside of the airport. Additionally, the pieces that are against the built-ins are designed for a longer stay, but also are powered to allow different charging of devices and just kind of that lounge and comfort aspect as well. Something important to note was our sustainability and occupant comfort considerations throughout the entire furniture selection process. So not only are all of the pieces you're seeing here today made in the USA, which helps to reduce our carbon footprint for the overall project, but they are also Green Guard certified, meaning that they have low chemical emissions for improved indoor air quality, which is fairly critical for populated spots such as the airport. They also meet or exceed the BIFMA testing, which is for weight limits of individual seats. And these were designed specifically for long-term durable construction. So the intent is for these pieces to last a significant amount of time and thus contributing to the sustainable aspect. We also held a variety of sit test and maintenance evaluations with the Port of Portland employees to ensure the comfort and ease of access for all body types and all ages for these pieces of furniture, but also to meet the cleanability and the maintenance factors as required by the port. And if we move into the center or the coffee node, we also had a really great opportunity to provide this communal table or these communal tables. And this was really a spot that we wanted to provide for passengers to work, grab coffee, recharge, literally, and maybe even engage in a friendly conversation with their fellow passengers at these power tables. And we actually partnered with a local furniture designer here in Portland, the Joinery, and we designed these tables in collaboration with them, which they fabricated at their Portland facility, made from Oregon white oak. And in the center node, you can see how the communal tables are flanking the coffee kiosk in the center, as well as it features this beautiful artwork by local artist Jacob Hashimoto that creates a sense of place, but also signifies a destination and is another great wayfinding feature as passengers are moving throughout the concourse. And fun fact, while the coffee retailer has not yet built out their space, there is a large patch of the old PDX carpet in this area. So next time you're at the airport, make sure you get your foot selfie with the famous carpet before it goes away. And as we move down to the east end, or the back porch of the project, as we like to call it, for its views and connection to Mount Hood, we wanted to create a spot here that was comfortable where the furniture invites you to sit down and stay a while. This seating in particular is designed to be durable and cleanable and was specifically selected for all body types. While it provides a feeling of a low lounge chair, the sit is actually higher than a traditional lounge chair, so it helps with the ease of getting in and out of the seat, yet remaining comfortable and supportive. The wood drums that you're seeing, they are also designed and fabricated by the Joinery from locally sourced Doug fir. And I think this view right here really captures the spirit and the essence of why so many people travel to Portland, live here, and most importantly, what makes the Portland Airport experience so unique. And so while we've touched upon how daylighting, acoustics, and furniture can contribute to occupant comfort, Pooja will be wrapping up with the other sustainability features of the project.
Thank you, Ashley. So I take this back. So this is our net positive diagram, and Ashley, Michael, and Amaya did a great job talking about a lot of the features that are on the inside of the building, but I'm going to walk you through some of the ones on the outside. So one of our big stories was the taxiway outside of the project where all the planes drive around had to be redone for this project, which means we had to tear up all of this concrete. And one thing we were able to do on this project was get a crusher on site and reuse all of that concrete as aggregate for the new taxiway. So that's a huge embodied carbon reduction for this project, which is great. Another thing we did was work with the Energy Trust of Oregon to get incentives to do a solar study for the roof. And we're happy to say that the project is solar ready. So we're using this perfectly angled south-facing roof to eventually possibly get some solar panels up there. The roof also uses light colors to reduce the heat island effect around the building. We also redid the bike path that was running through here and added some low irrigation native vegetation on either side. And that, along with water efficient plumbing fixtures, allowed us to reduce our water use by 33%. And altogether, this project is on track to meet LEED Gold. LEED was definitely a struggle at times to adapt for an airport. Some of the issues or lessons learned that we ran into were, I mentioned our water reduction. We could have further reduced our water reduction if we used purple pipe throughout the campus and used gray water to flush toilets. But that, as I said, is a campus level strategy. So there's a number of things we found that would have been better if we were kind of looking at the entire PDX campus and pursuing LEED for campuses, and then doing a project like this within it. It's really hard to take just a part and then apply it to a whole. The same goes for if you're working on a project that's on a campus, you're going to run into some district energy systems, and so it's that kind of makes documenting the energy credits a bit more challenging. Some other challenges we ran across where FAA regulations came into conflict with LEED requirements. So for example, LEED wants you to have a biodiverse landscape, but at an airport, you want the exact opposite. You don't want wildlife there. They will get into the planes, they'll die in the planes. It's not a good situation for anybody. So we're trying to use, even the vegetation they're all plants that aren't going to attract a lot of wildlife. Which is, kind of goes against what LEED wants. Same for the light pollution reduction. FAA has requirements on the amount of lighting you need, and that doesn't really jive with LEED's light pollution credits. And then finally, our last challenge was dealing with the occupant counts and occupant behavior as they pertain to airports and trying to marry that with LEED. So if you've pursued LEED before, you have to calc out your regularly occupied spaces and permanent employees. Well, the port employs 80,000 regular employees, so that already drives the numbers way up, and not to mention the hundreds of passengers that are coming through here every day. So what that meant for us was, if we, for example, wanted to pursue the bike credit, we would have to add an unreasonable amount of bike parking that wouldn't really be used by passengers that are taking suitcases with them and getting on planes. So there's some things that just didn't quite line up with LEED. Another one was controllability of systems. So LEED gives you credits if you can give your occupants access to lighting and thermal controls, but you don't want, hundreds of passengers messing with the lighting and the thermal comfort, because everyone has different needs and that's not something you really want to make accessible to the greater public. So those were some of the issues we ran into. But in the end, I highly recommend, if you're pursuing a non-traditional LEED project like an airport, find someone at the USGBC to work with, because we were actually able to work through some of our challenges. We were able to get the community connectivity credit, which has to do with all of the various amenities that you need in a community. And we made the argument, well, this airport actually has a huge amount of amenities within it and kind of acts like its own sort of community within the airport campus. And we were able to get that credit. And that was sort of not necessarily going exactly by the book, but we worked with someone who helped us interpret the intent of the credit and helped us understand how we could document to achieve those. So biggest lesson learned was find someone at the USGBC and work with them, because they are way more flexible than you would think. So with that, let's open it up to some questions. What questions do you guys have for us? And please put those in the chat.
I'm pretty sure everybody's jaws are just open in amazement. That's why there's the silence and lack of questions.
I hope so. Love this. Thank you, Paige. Andrew said exactly. His jaws dropped. How did you decide on the biophilic elements, the certain areas that were pulled for inspiration? Yeah, I think that when the team did that tour of the gorge, it made a huge impression. We looked at those images as well as several others from the Pacific Northwest throughout the design process, and I think it was sort of concepts that we grabbed from there that stuck around. So sort of canyon-like forms felt very Oregon, very Columbia River Gorge. The dappled light through the trees, that really stuck with us, I think, from beginning to end. Were modifications to circadian rhythms evaluated in the sequence to and from the new terminal?
I actually think we missed one just above that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, did we come across any solar issues not anticipated in the studies, or did it all go according to plan? Maybe I'll let Amaya jump in first on that one.
Sure. So most things went as according to plan or as anticipated in the studies. We did very thorough studies throughout a long period of time. However, some design decisions that were made throughout the process, like not including shading in the hold rooms that were facing north, because of that desire to allow for those views to the exterior and that connection to nature and all that. We did know that was going to allow for some more morning sun to come into the concourse, which was okay because of the reasons that I explained earlier, that it's mostly affecting the hold rooms, and it was going to be something minimal and just for a short period of time. So that to us, it was more important to keep that connection to the exterior. But obviously, it was something that, yes, we knew about, and we saw that it was definitely happening early in the morning and just in the summer. But so it's not that we did not anticipate it, it's just that something that is happening.
And I think I'd also add, as with any design process, I'm sure that we're all familiar with, and daylighting is no different. It really is something that builds on itself. So I don't believe that there was anything that immediately surprised us in the process, but we certainly worked through the team to do initial studies, build on that, revise, tweak, all of those things. And I certainly recall flooring finishes were part of that process. Frit patterning and density was part of that process. And so it's really important to allow for that time and that back and forth to really get the great end result.
Perfect. I think, Michael, you could probably also talk to Brent's question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so there was nothing that, so the question was, were modifications to circadian rhythm evaluated in the sequence to and from the new terminal? We have not. I think a lot of the, currently in our industry, as I mentioned, there is a connection coming into play of electric lighting and circadian rhythm, but there's a lot of extenuating circumstances and other factors that go into that. That's why we focus so much on daylighting, because we know that that really is such a large influence. The existing airport, those other terminals that I'm sure people are familiar with, also do a great job at delivering daylight into the space, which is really important. So we wanted to continue that. Evaluate differences between the two as it relates to circadian rhythm, but just wanting to bring in that natural component being, really an important aspect.
Perfect. Okay. Has the design or approach inspired the port to update or adapt any of the existing airport features? Let's see. So I know that I think that the ceiling system that we used is now being used in other parts of the airport. And that kind of means that it's a great ceiling for acoustics. It's also a great ceiling for maintenance because it has a tech zone strip that allows for maintenance to easily take down a panel, get up there and put it back up. So there's a huge durability story there. And then I can't speak to the terminal core project that's going on, but I have to imagine that some of the themes from this project will carry over into that project, because I'm sure that they have huge sustainability goals as well. I mean, the Port of Portland as an organization has very strong sustainability values. So I expect we'll see some of these similar themes in that project. Let's see. What were some of the surprises from design to project completion? What type of feedback are you getting? Let's see. Ashley, do you wanna take that one on?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So I would say biggest surprise would be COVID, as it was in all of our lives. And we were so lucky in the fact that the port and our contractor Skanska adapted quickly and easily, and construction continued as it was with social distancing. And it was no big deal. We were able to hold virtual construction site walks and virtual meetings, and it became like old hat. It was easy for us to communicate still and really function as a team as if we were all in person. But that said, lead times were affected by specific products, not only in getting materials to the site and some delays there, but also the work progressed at a slightly slower pace depending upon what would, say, for example, if something was being installed, that we would need to respect that 6-foot distance. So that was something that Skanska definitely did a great job coordinating and ensuring that safety on site. And in terms of feedback that we're getting, we've heard from all types of passengers and the port and airline employees that having the amount of daylight in this space is an incredible positive impact on the airport. And we heard from so many of the airline employees, they were really excited to start working in the new concourse and just enjoying that connection to the daylight and the views that can be challenging sometimes when you're in such a large space.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Joanna says natural light in the restrooms is also a nice feel for all users. Totally agree. I don't know if we mentioned that, but there is frosted glass in both of the restrooms, and it is refreshing to have daylight in the space like that. And there's also some glass in the tenant areas. So I think those are two places where you don't usually see that, see windows in airports in those places, but we were able to incorporate that. Anything else in these last 3 minutes? If you came in a little bit late, I made an announcement at the beginning that if you want AIA credits and you are not part of Hennebery Eddy Architects, please email Michael Moran and send him your AIA number, and he will get you credits. I'll repost his email in the chat just in case. Can't wait to see it in person. Yes, I agree. Can't wait for everyone to see it in person when things hopefully go back to normal. Thank you, Michael, Amaya, Ashley, for your hard work on this presentation as well. It was really good to be able to come together and tell the story.
Absolutely. We're really honored to have been part of this team, been able to share the story as it relates to lighting. I think, Pooja, I'll reiterate, like you mentioned, there are so many people that aren't on screen right now that did a lot of great work, I know, for our individual teams and other consultants as well. And it only comes together like this if you have a really great team, and we did. And so we're really, like I said, honored to have been a little bit of the story here with everybody.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And I hope you attend more Sustainable Building Week events.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Bye, guys.